I should have walked away the moment I saw that wall. But when you run demolition for a living, you don't get paid to hesitate. You get paid to knock things down. Fast, cheap, no questions. That night, standing in the basement of Ridgeway State Hospital, I found something that didn't belong. The blueprints showed a corridor. What stood there instead was a wall. Not part of the original structure. The bricks were uneven, the mortar sloppy, like someone had rushed to seal it off by hand. Harris, the city rep, told me to forget it. Mark it inaccessible and move on, he said. But I couldn't. Not after I noticed how the air changed near that spot. Heavier, colder. Not after I started dreaming about it. Always the same dream. A long white room with rows of chairs. One empty seat at the far end, waiting for something I couldn't see. Waiting for me. And when Manny, my best guy, steady as stone, looked at that sealed corridor and walked off the job without a word, I knew something was wrong. Something was still inside, and it didn't want to be disturbed. Ridgeway State Hospital had been standing on the outskirts of town since the 1930s, a hulking brick giant people pretended not to see. It shut down in 1987 after decades of rumors, patients gone missing, experiments never recorded, an entire wing quietly abandoned. For most folks, it was a story to scare children. Drive past it with your eyes fixed on the road, whisper that the last patient was never discharged. Some said a woman was kept there whose name was forbidden to be spoken aloud, but those were just urban legends. For me, Ridgeway wasn't folklore, it was money. The city wanted the land cleared, and my demolition outfit was small enough to take the jobs no one else wanted. Mold, asbestos, collapsing girders, those didn't scare me. Missing deadlines did. That's why the $30,000 bonus meant everything. On the surface, the job looked like every other teardown. Red brick walls, steel beams, slate floors, the smell of dust and rot rising from every corridor. But Ridgeway was different. From the first day, the men moved slower. Ladders shifted. Generators flickered despite full fuel. Tools disappeared and reappeared in places no one remembered leaving them. I told myself old buildings groan, pipes rattle, nerves play tricks, but unease spread anyway. Then came Manny, ex-military, steady as stone. I found him in the basement staring at the bricked corridor, his face pale, eyes glassy like he'd been listening to something I couldn't hear. When I called his name, he finally whispered, "I'm done. It doesn't want to go." Then he left and never came back. I should have asked him what he meant. Instead, I convinced myself he'd cracked under stress. People do in this line of work. Still, his words stayed with me. Nights grew heavier. I slept little, worked late, and when I did sleep, the dream came back. Always the long room, always the empty chair that wasn't empty at all, waiting for me. The city sent clipboard reps now and then, clean shoes and practiced smiles. None of them asked about the sealed corridor. None even seemed to know it was there. But the whispers of Ridgeway lingered. Stories about a patient erased from records, a woman whose presence warped the air itself, a name no one dared speak. And I began to realize, maybe the corridor wasn't just forgotten, maybe it was buried. The night I finally stayed late, the hospital felt different. Silence pressed against every wall. The concrete saw screamed as I pressed it into the bricks. Dust billowed. sharp and chemical, coating my mask. Whoever sealed this place hadn't done it for convenience. They'd done it to bury something. Chunk by chunk, the wall gave way. My sledgehammer broke the last row, stone crashing to the floor. My flashlight cut into darkness. The corridor beyond was pristine. No graffiti, no rot, no water damage. Time itself had stopped inside. The air smelled of antiseptic. The tiles were spotless, except for the fresh prints I left. At the far end waited a single, padded cell. The door creaked open beneath my hand. Cushions, yellowed with age, lined the walls. A rusted cart stood in the center, leather restraints folded neatly. Above the bolted desk, a cracked mirror split my reflection into jagged shards. On the floor beneath the cot, deep carvings etched a circle into the linoleum. Symbols I didn't recognize pulled my mind toward the center. On the chair rested a patient logbook. Typed entries listed diets, sedations, behavior notes, but the last page was handwritten.
Do not remove her. Do not observe her. Do not allow her name to be spoken aloud. I flipped the cover, scratched deep into the back. One name appeared again and again. On the mattress straps, on the walls, ragged grooves etched by fingernails. I didn't speak it, I only read it, and the temperature collapsed. My breath clouded, the cart creaked. I wasn't alone anymore. I sealed the corridor the next morning, hauled plywood over the gap, bolted it down, sprayed asbestos in thick black paint. The crew didn't question it. Maybe they didn't want to know. But Ridgeway wasn't finished. Accidents stacked like dominoes. An excavator clipped a gas line that shouldn't exist. A support beam collapsed seconds after the backhoe idled beside it. Nate, our welder, caught a torch flashback that scorched his arm. He said nothing, only stared at me with trembling lips. The men stopped believing my excuses. By the fifth accident, when Reggie dropped a steel bracket after swearing something had seized his hands, the crew abandoned the site. Ridgeway had won. But I couldn't leave. The bonus was survival. My debts, my family. Without this job, I had nothing. So I went back alone. Pried off the plywood, entered the sealed wing once more. The air pressed against my skin, heavy like invisible hands. The hallway stretched longer than before, doors opening just a crack as I passed. Then came the crying. At first faint, like water through pipes, then clearer, a woman's sobs, broken by gasps, singing fragments of a lullaby with no tune. I followed. Each door I checked was empty, rusted beds, restraints, bolted cabinets. Then I turned, and all the doors had closed quietly behind me. The crying stopped at the padded cell. Inside, the mirror was freshly cracked. The carved circle looked faded, worn, as if scraped away. The restraints were gone. And I felt her. Not seen, not heard, felt. The air breathed with me, rhythm matched mine. A presence stood inches beyond perception. I whispered the name, once, then again. The silence buckled, the cot strap snapped tight without hands. The mirror reformed, then shattered anew, revealing a face beside mine. Hollow-eyed, pale. I bolted, ran through warped corridors as doors slammed behind me, her crying rising into laughter. I burst into the boiler chamber, lungs heaving. The silence snapped back. But I knew the truth. Speaking her name hadn't bound her, it had freed her. Days vanished. EMTs later said I was missing 3 days. I remembered only one. They claimed the corridor had collapsed, folded in on itself, a freak failure. But I knew Ridgway hadn't buried me. She had let me walk out. At home, the city emailed me photos. The wing cleared, the cell ordinary, the circle erased. But in the mirror, zoomed pixel by pixel, I saw it. The faintest blur over my shoulder. That night, the silence in my kitchen shifted, heavy, waiting. She hadn't stayed behind. She had come with me. 3 nights later, I awoke to the smell of antiseptic. My house was dark, colder than outside. My breath fogged the air. From the living room came the rasp of leather restraints tightening. Flashlight in hand, I crept forward. The room had changed. The furniture remained, but the angles were wrong, stretched, warped. Against the far wall stood the cot from Ridgway. The cracked mirror leaned above it, reflecting not just me, but her. Tall, hollow-eyed, lips moving without sound. I spun. The room was empty. In the glass, she stood closer. The straps snapped, lashing out. One coiled my wrist, another my throat. I collapsed, gasping. In the mirror, she stepped forward, cracking glass, curling outward like a door. Her hands stretched through the fractures, pale and too many jointed.
I tried to smash the glass with my flashlight. Instead of breaking, the mirror drank the blow, the reflection flaring brighter. Her figure sharpened, more solid, more real. Heat brushed my neck, breath that wasn't mine. Her voice wasn't sound, it was pressure inside my skull, repeating the name I had spoken. My body locked. I couldn't scream, couldn't breathe. The mirror yawned wider, and for the first time, she stepped fully into my world. And I understood Manny's words. It doesn't want to go. And now, neither would I. I woke on a stretcher beneath a pale morning sky. An EMT leaned closer. You're lucky someone noticed. If you'd stayed inside any longer. Inside. That word cut deep. I told her I'd only been gone an hour, maybe 2. She frowned. 3 days. Later, they explained. The corridor had collapsed, folded in on itself. A freak structural failure. Reports said I'd been trapped. I didn't argue. My throat was raw, my wrist bore a scrape I couldn't explain, and I wanted nothing more than to leave. A week later, the city emailed, cleanup complete, corridor cleared, photos attached. I scrolled in silence. The padded cell looked ordinary now. Cot rusted, straps brittle, mirror cracked, unremarkable. The circle erased, but the silence in my kitchen thickened as I stared at the images. Zooming into the mirror, I found no reflection of myself, just a blur, faint but present, standing over my shoulder. The air grew colder, my breath fogged. Maybe Ridgway had collapsed with her still inside, but I knew better. She hadn't stayed behind. She had followed me home. That's where my story ends, at least for now. The hospital is gone, the land repurposed. People jog past where Ridgway once stood, never knowing what was sealed inside. But I know. The accidents, the voices, the mirror, they didn't stay in that basement. They followed me. Every night, when the house grows too quiet,
I feel her near. Maybe I was never meant to break through that wall. Maybe the warning in the logbook was the last defense anyone had. So if you ever find a place that feels wrong, colder than it should be, heavier than air should press, don't stay. Don't look closer. And above all, don't speak the name you find scratched into the walls. Because once you do, it won't let you go. And tell me, are you certain you're alone right now?